So hi everyone, good evening, good morning actually. How are you all doing? Good, I hope all of you all are well. I hope all of you all are also enjoying this week. I'm great. And it's great to see you all again early morning, first thing in the morning. Nice. Good, yes. Had breakfast and ready for class. Huh? Good. So today we have an interesting topic up ahead of us. Um, Earlier this week, we covered a topic called syllogisms. We got started with a little bit of seeing a few premises, trying to judge if those conclusions can be drawn from the premises or not. Yeah. So today also, we are going to continue on those lines and we are going to get into other topics of critical reasoning. So this is called critical reasoning. Now, where is critical reasoning useful? See, all your recruiters, no, all your employers are going to try to judge whether you will make good employees and whether you will make good managers. And at any workplace, in any large organization, what is required of us as an employee or as a manager is to know about what is going on in the world around us, be updated with the news, and secondly, to take good decisions based on that information. So wherever anything is happening in the world, it affects us in some way. Like for example, COVID is something that has affected all of us over the last 1 year. And we should take good decisions for the betterment of our company, for the betterment of us personally and our families, and also the colleagues who we work with. So this is all that the recruiters and the interview panel is trying to judge through the questions on critical reasoning. If you are given a particular piece of information, can you absorb all the information that there is, or are you missing out some stuff, right? Secondly, are you able to look between the lines? Are you able to spot some hidden information that is not told to you directly? Remember what we did in the initial part of our class when we had our photo exercise. Some things we spotted directly in the photo, right? The guy was sleeping. We saw a lake. We saw a few mountains. Some things were told to us indirectly. These were the feelings, the emotions that we had to realize when we saw the photo, right? Similarly, critical reasoning will also have a few things which are not told to us directly. They are hidden. So today, let's try and spot all of these things and have a look at some questions of critical reasoning. Right. Slides visible, I hope. Great. So I'm going to start with a slide that we've seen before. An argument made up of a premise and a conclusion. Okay, so we've seen this slide before. We were given one or more premises, statements, and we had to judge whether our conclusions can be derived from that or not. We were trying to judge whether the conclusions follow or not, right? Whether the argument is valid or whether it is invalid. This is something that we've already judged once. What was the topic that we called it at that time? It was called syllogisms. Yeah. Now the same questions can be asked in a bit of different way, right? So conclusions, premise, like we all know, stated or given facts assumed to be true. And although it may sound a bit weird, like some of the questions that we studied, all cars are cats, all fans are cats, all of that, right? May not be true, but for the purpose of our question, we have to assume it to be true. And conclusion was deductions based on the premise. If the premises are true, does the conclusion follow? This is what we were trying to judge. Okay. One basic thing that you need to remember is that in some different types of question, it becomes important to identify what is a premise and what is a conclusion. Some questions don't give it to us directly. Okay. All the question we did till now told us statement and conclusion. There were two statements and there were two conclusions, and we had to judge whether the conclusion is valid or not. But some questions have one statement which has both the premise and the conclusion. And we have to identify what the argument is. Okay. So just today, for the first couple of slides, just as a warm up, we are only going to practice how to identify within a given statement what is a premise and what is a conclusion. Okay. So let's get into a bit of practice directly. Now, if you're given a statement, humans cannot live on Venus because the surface temperature is too high. Which one is a premise and which one is a conclusion out of this? What do you guys think? Okay, so what you can do to answer is that if you think both are premises, you can just put P comma P. If you think both are conclusions, you can put C comma C. If you think first one is a premise and second one is a conclusion, you can put P comma C. And if you think first one is a conclusion and second one is a premise, you can put C comma P. Okay, let's work like this for some of the next few slides. Yeah. Okay. So we have one statement here, right? Now we have to start getting used to these statements, which will contain both the premise and the conclusion, because now we have to judge whether argument is a valid argument or not. Yeah. So humans cannot live on Venus because the surface temperature is too high. What have we seen on the previous slide? Premise comes first. Okay. And from the premise, conclusion is drawn. So wherever you are trying to differentiate between premise and conclusion, premise is always the cause and conclusion is the effect. Premise comes before and conclusion comes after. Conclusion is the result. There are a few keywords which can help you identify premise and conclusion. Okay. So one of those keywords is because. Because suggests that the part which comes after it is a reason. Yeah. And where does reason fit in premise and conclusion? Reason comes in premise. Okay. So because, or you can say because or due to the fact that, yeah, these are some words which identify the reason. And how can you identify conclusion? You can have words like thus, therefore, so. We can say that. These words suggest that whatever follows is a conclusion. So in this case, surface temperature is too high is a reason. It is a premise. And because of this reason, humans cannot live on Venus. So humans cannot live on Venus is a conclusion drawn on the basis of our premise. Okay, so the answer I was looking for was C comma P. Conclusion followed by premise. Let's do another one. Simple one. Just trying to identify premise and conclusion. Good. I can see that all of you all are fresh. All of you all are rested from the amount of replies that are coming in the chat. Very nice to see. And this is an interesting topic as well. Not very difficult. Doesn't depend on your knowledge of English or grammar or reading speed, nothing. So just try to remember, premise comes first, conclusion comes later. Okay. Now within these two statements, Siripuram Gym will grow its membership by 20% in the next 6 months. This is talking about the future, will grow by 20% in the next 6 months. Okay, so if we put it on our timeline, this is somewhere in the future. Siripuram Gym has recently crafted a clever ad campaign that it plans to air on several local radio stations. This is somewhere close to the present. Right? Has recently crafted, so the ad is ready, and it will shortly be airing it on several local radio stations. Okay, so what is the cause? The ad campaign that it will air on the radio stations is the cause, and the effect is that the membership base will grow by, oh, this is I think 20%. There's a typo here, in the next 6 months. Okay, so what comes first? Premise comes first. So premise comes first and the conclusion comes later. Premise is the reason. So because it has a new ad campaign that it will air on the radio stations, this will result in membership growing by 20% in next 6 months. Okay, so again we had C comma P. This was your answer. Okay, so any doubts here? It's just a bit of warm up on identifying premise and identifying the conclusion. Okay, anyone who's not understood, please ask. Huh? Now, let's move on to something new. The premise was the reason or what comes before, and conclusion was the result or what comes after. And this line, which joins the premise and the conclusion, is called the line of reasoning. Right? So when you say the premise leads to the conclusion, how strong is that line of reasoning is what we are trying to judge. Okay. Are there other possibilities? Is the conclusion the only result possible from the premise, or are there other possibilities? Is the conclusion beyond the scope of the premise, or is it a strong line of reasoning that we can draw? This is what we need to judge. So this is one argument entirely. Okay. So first identify premises in your mind now. Now we've got a hang of how to identify premises. So identify premises, identify conclusion. And is that line of reasoning strong is what you need to ask yourself. Is it a strong or a weak argument? What do you think? Okay, some have replied that it is a weak argument. So those who are on weak, you want to let me know why you find it is a weak argument? What are your thoughts? What else is possible? So so far in the replies, I've got around 60-65% who are on weak and 30-35% who are on strong. So it's approximately 60-40 split. Now it's increasing. It's around 70-30 now. I don't want to bias the answers, so I'll stop giving updates. Yeah, so anyone who has chosen weak, why do you say it is a weak? Huh. So Gayatri has an interesting one. Why we should move is not clear. Yes, perfect. Or there is 1A8 who says, no particular reason to move. And on the other hand, some are arguing for strong. So Hema says, strong because there are more residents, it is probably developed. Yes. And it could be strong, says 3F1. If the person who wants to move wants to make a business. Okay. So fair enough. Your reasons are okay. Yeah. But what did we say about strong and weak? How to define strong is between the premise and the conclusion. Is the conclusion inevitable from the premise? Which means, is the conclusion the only outcome that can be said from the premise? Then only it is strong. Okay. If there is even a slightest bit of weakness, if there are other possibilities that are there, then it becomes a weak argument. So in this case, let's identify the premises first. Kolkata has 20 million residents, premise 1. Bhubaneswar has 8 million residents, premise 2. And Vizag has 3 million residents, premise 3. So the premises 1, 2, and 3 are just telling you how many residents each city has. So these are the information that is given to you. And from these premises, you are being told a conclusion because there is a word therefore. So it's easy to identify the conclusion. We must move. This is the conclusion. So in any critical reasoning argument, all you should do is ask the reason why. Why should we move? Is it a certainty that because there are 20 million and 8 million and 3 million, we must move? Is the only reason possible that population is the only reason? That's one factor which we consider. And like some have said who have opted for strong, if you want to make a business or if you're looking for a developed city, then you go to the one which has a highest population, right? But that's one reason. What about other reasons? Is population the only factor which you consider when you move to the city? What about medical facilities? Is there any information about whether good medical facilities are available, whether good education is available, maybe for your kids, whether the pollution, now this has become quite an important factor of late. Yeah, pollution, whether it is healthy to go to the city or whether you should be staying in a smaller city. How about the greenery and the parks and the open spaces for entertainment? Nowadays, in fact, after COVID, crowded spaces and bigger cities have become riskier a bit. Yeah, because the ability to spread transmission very quickly. So all these reasons, which the author has not mentioned, are holes in this line of reasoning. This is our line of reasoning. So the line of reasoning that the author said was, we consider population only and we go because we move to the highest population. But we managed to find many holes in this line of reasoning, which he had not considered. So therefore, it becomes a weak argument. If none of these factors are able to be identified, and if the conclusion is the only outcome which is possible based on the premise, then it becomes a strong argument. Otherwise, it is a weak argument. If you are able to identify any holes or gaps in the argument, it's a weak argument. Okay, so this is nice. Is this interesting? Is this a type of question that you guys have studied before in your concept classes? Because we are doing more of a practice today, and I'm also trying to take you through how to solve. Okay, so currently again, I have a 50-50 split between strong and weak. So the class is equally divided as of now. Okay, now it's heading in the direction of weak. Now it changes to 75-25 so far. The weak is winning. So those who have chosen weak, do you want to point out some of the weaknesses that you have observed? Why weak? Good. So some questions have come up. In critical reasoning, especially when you're trying to identify strong or weak arguments, ask the question why. My mail was delivered yesterday. Premise, only one premise. This word suggests that whatever follows should be a conclusion, because premise comes first, conclusion comes later. Hence, so this becomes your conclusion. So because my mail was delivered yesterday, therefore it will be delivered today. Why? Is it compulsory? It's nowhere given in the argument that mail is delivered daily. Where is it given? This is not given. Yeah. Today it could be that mail is delivered daily, but today might be a Sunday. Or it could be that mail is not even delivered daily. It could be weekly, in which case it will not be delivered today. It could be also whenever mail is there. So the postman will only come if there is something to be delivered. This happens in some of the villages, in smaller villages, that the postman doesn't come every day. So ask the question why. To go from premise to conclusion, why is it compulsory that if it was delivered yesterday, will it be delivered today? We already found two weaknesses in this line of reasoning. One is that it's not given that it's delivered daily. So that's one weakness. And even if it's delivered daily, today might be a Sunday, or you could say today might be a public holiday. So in which case the mail will not come. So again, this is not a strong argument. This is a weak argument, because we managed to find two holes or gaps in the reasoning. Okay. Now, what is an assumption? Okay. An assumption is something that is hidden on this side of the argument, on the premise side. Yeah, this is hidden. An assumption is something that is used to prove your line of reasoning. So this assumption makes the line of reasoning stronger. Right? So what is an assumption that our author has used? In this case, if this was a strong argument, what would be the assumption? The assumption would be that the mail is delivered every day. If we assume this to be true, that the mail comes daily, and this assumption becomes true, then suddenly this argument becomes very strong. Okay. So an assumption is something on the side of the premise. It comes before. It is a reason, which, if assumed to be true, the line of reasoning becomes stronger. So now we are going to try to spot assumptions in these situations. Bhaskar has a very interesting question in the chat. When we're talking about premise and conclusion, do we need to relate it to real situations in critical reasoning? Yes, Bhaskar. Try to ask as many questions as possible related to real situations. What the examiner is trying to judge is whether you are able to take real situations into account for all the possibilities, ask questions of real situations and judge what are all the possible outcomes. And based on that, are you able to take a decision at work? This is what they are trying to assess in critical reasoning. Okay, so we've done premise, we've done conclusion. We've tried to identify in a type of question which has both of them given together. What is premise, what is conclusion, and how strong is this line of reasoning? Yeah, whether you can spot any gaps, or whether conclusion is the only outcome that is possible. So that was your line of reasoning. So now I am introducing two new elements. One is assumption and one is inference. Assumption is on the side of the premise. assumption is a cause. Yeah, assumption comes before. And inference is on the side of the conclusion. Inference is an effect. Inference is a result. Or inference comes after. Both of these things are hidden. Okay, they will not be told to us in the question. These are something that we have to spot. Okay, so now we have to go back to something like our photo exercise. What is the author actually trying to say? What has he assumed in making this argument? So assumption is an unstated or an implied premise. What needs to be true for the argument to be valid? And inference, just going back, inference will be an unstated conclusion. So I have another slide. Let's do a few examples of assumption and then we will come to inference. Okay, so what is the assumption in this simple statement? What assumption has the author used? First, try to spot premise, spot conclusion, and your line of reasoning. And is your line of reasoning weak? Are there any gaps? And if there are gaps, how can you fill that gap? What is the author assumed in making this statement? This is what you want to try to spot. Okay, so 3S2 says because he is not tall. So because he is not tall becomes a premise. Okay, so 254 is also right. This is a premise because he is not tall, and Rahul cannot play basketball is your conclusion. Because the word because gives you a reason. This is the reason and this is the outcome or the result. So many of you all have the answer. Okay, so because he is not 6 feet tall, this is your premise. Rahul cannot play basketball. This is your conclusion. What is the assumption? What is the hidden information that the author has not told us? The assumption is that only people who are 6 feet tall can play basketball. That is your assumption. And if this assumption were to be true, then this argument becomes suddenly stronger. This becomes a strong argument. If it is true that you can only play basketball if you are above 6 feet tall, then this premise and this conclusion makes perfect sense for the author to say it this way. If the assumption is not true, then we can find some holes in this. Yeah, you can ask the question why. Who says that you need to be 6 feet to play? Only if the assumption is true, then the argument becomes strong. Okay, good. So those who are able to spot the assumption, perfect. Let's do a few more. So the statement is here. Everybody loves reading adventure stories. And I have two assumptions for you. Does this statement assume that adventure stories are the only reading material? And does it assume that nobody loves reading any other reading material? What would you say about these assumptions? Yeah, so everybody loves reading adventure stories. Okay. But does it mean that adventure stories are the only reading material? No. Nowhere does it mention only. Everybody loves reading adventure stories. There can be other things that they love also. There can be horror stories. There can be comedy stories. There can be children's stories. Yeah. So this assumption is not necessarily correct. That adventure stories are the only reading material. No, you don't need to assume this. And If everybody loves reading adventure stories, nobody loves reading any other material. That is also something that you cannot assume to be true. Because there is no only. If there was only here, everybody loves reading only adventure stories, then this would have been true. But in the absence of this only, this is false because they can love reading other stuff as well. So there can be other stuff available, which is here, and everyone can also love reading other stuff. Okay, so both of them are false. I was looking for F comma F. What about the next one? So only one correct answer from, okay, now 2 and 3 from all those who've replied. So when you try to look at assumptions, no, you have to look at it from the perspective of the people who have put up the notice. Huh? The assumptions will be from the point of view of the owners of the club. Whoever has put this notice, what have they assumed? So you have to see it from their perspective. If they are telling you to read the notice before entering the club, are they assuming that people are literate? Yes, because if you are expected to read, then there is an assumption that people are literate. So this is an assumption which they have made. Okay. Are they also assuming that club is not for blind person? Obviously, if you can't read, then you can't enter. Read the notice before entering the club. So if you are blind and you can't read the notice, then you cannot enter. So it also means that there is an assumption that the club is not for a blind person. So these two statements were true, comma, true. Both of these were valid assumptions. Okay. So how is this? Trying to spot what are the hidden things, trying to spot the assumptions. Okay, so this is an interesting question from 3B6. How can he know if he can't see the notice? But 3B6, we are not assessing from the blind person's perspective. The assumptions are from the people who have put up the notice, not from the blind person's perspective. So 1A8 asks a very interesting question. Why don't we assume that the script is also in Braille? Okay, but right now the statements are here. There's only one statement, and the fact that it is given in Braille is not mentioned in our question. And the assumptions which we have to judge are here. So since Braille is not mentioned here, I won't take it as something that we should assume. We need to judge these questions, question 1 and question 2, only on the basis of what is given. So we can't make more assumptions about it. That's not a good plan. Yeah, it is slightly confusing, Madhuri, I know. I have a few more questions on these lines, which are from your exams. So let's go into some exam question. It will become easier as we solve more. You will be able to spot what is a valid assumption and what is not. What jump you should make and say, okay, this is assumed, and where you shouldn't cross that gap. So now this is more on the lines of your statement and conclusion kind of answer. Yeah. There is a statement and there are two assumptions, and we have to choose either one or 2 or 3 or 4, based on which assumption is implied and which assumption is not implied. And as I said before, we saw the assumptions on the previous one from the point of view of the people who had put up the notice. In this case also, the assumption will be put from the point of view of the person who has put this warning. So you can say the Indian Railways in this case, since the warning is always put up by the railways. Right. So shall we solve? A warning in train compartment to stop train pull chain, and penalty for improper use 500 rupees. From the point of view of the railways, does this assume that on certain occasion you want to stop a running train? That's why the chain has been provided. Yes. So 2 is an implicit assumption. Yeah. If there was no need to stop a running train, then the chain would not have been provided in the first place. So there is an assumption that you may need to stop for whatever reason, some emergency, some pickpocket, some problem. Yeah. And what is the need for this penalty? Penalty for improper use. You only give a warning because something has happened before, right? Some people have misused the alarm chain. So this penalty is to discourage the misuse of the alarm. Yeah, you've seen people, right? Those who've traveled by train, people just pull it randomly because they want to get down somewhere in between the station. Those who stay in a smaller village or smaller city where the train doesn't stop, so pull the chain. So there is a penalty. Okay, so this is also an implicit assumption. Here, the answer is the third one. So try to see from the point of view of the railways, given the statements, these statements are your conclusions. Huh? So they have come after, and you have to decide whether these assumptions are implicit or not. They have to come before. So conclusion comes after, and assumption has to come before all those actions are taken. So what has been assumed? This is what we have to judge. So Madhuri, is it getting easier from the previous slide? Now that we are solving a bit more, are you able to understand? Yeah. Let's do a few more. I have a bit of practice in this. Try to judge from the statement what is the assumption from the point of view of those who are taking the action. So now this assumption will be from the point of view of the referee, the person who decides how long to play. What assumptions have gone on in his mind? So the standard playing time in a hockey match is 90 minutes. Now, okay. So good. Some of you all are confused by the word fatigued. Fatigued is tired, Satya. Okay. So the person who has set this playing time, is he assuming that players will feel tired after playing for 90 minutes? Not necessarily. There might be many reasons for setting it at 90 minutes. Maybe the crowd gets bored. Yeah, players can have much more stamina, right? So not necessary that all hockey players will feel tired after playing for 90 minutes. That is not why this minutes is set. It could have many other reasons. So this is not an implicit assumption. And 30 minutes of extra time is sometime provided is a completely unrelated statement. So this is outside the scope of what is given to you. So whether the match is undecided or not at the end of 90 and how much more time to provide is something that is unrelated to your statement. So 103 has a good question. There is a chance of players feeling fatigued, but an assumption is only true 103 if the assumption is making the conclusion strongest. Okay, it's making the conclusion unbreakable. If the assumption is true, conclusion has to be true. There is a chance, like you said, but there is a lot of other chance where hockey players don't feel tired, right? If they practice, if they have stamina. In fact, professional players rarely get tired. The upper limit is not because of tired. So you should look at it if the assumption is leading to the line of reasoning becoming unbreakable. If that is the only reason, yeah, then it is an assumption which should be implicit. So this is also not true. You have 4 over here. Good, but I really like the questions that are coming out in the chat. Okay, you're asking perfect pointed questions, which is nice to see. It also means that you're paying attention and solving. This one, the accuracy is much higher. Now I think we are settling into this type of question. They're starting to get what we are trying to judge. So 103, was this better? Are we moving towards what you're trying to get? See, there is no formula. There is nothing that I can draw on the board and you can understand that, okay, this is the only rule to be used in all the questions. No. This is English. This is why it is a part of verbal ability. You need to check what all possibilities are there. Is it strong? Is it weak? What is something that must be assumed? So whose point of view should you take this from? One must check the manufacturing date written at the back before buying a carton of milk. Can it be an assumption or can it be a statement made by a consumer forum or someone who is, in an advisory facility? Someone who is advising the consumer, the people who are buying the milk, yeah, what all to look at. So let's look at it from their perspective. So if they're saying one must check the manufacturing date written at the back before buying, is manufacturing date the only thing that you should check before buying? No, that's not what it is assumed. Manufacturing date can be one of the things that you need to check, but one must check. So it is one of the things which is compulsory. You must check. That is what it means. And have they also assumed that when they are asking you to check, it means the person who is checking, the consumer, the buyer, he should understand what is written, no, at the back of the packet. So this is similar to your club and blind person analogy. Yeah. So they have assumed that when you check the manufacturing date, you will understand what the date is written, yeah, in whatever size and font and letters and all that. So this is an implicit assumption. So your answer here is 2. Okay. Any doubts in this one, or anything, any doubts on the method, how we are going about it? Anything that you want me to explain again? Anyone who's not understood? I think slowly, like someone said in the chat, we are moving towards how to judge the answer in these type of questions. I think these type of questions are new to you all. You haven't studied this before, no, in concept classes? Let me know, anyone on the chat. Because quite a few topics that we've done would be something that is already taught to you, and we were told to go over the practice, like give you more of exam questions and try to practice. But this critical reasoning is also something new that has started coming up, maybe 1 or 2 questions in a paper. We have seen this in Infosys, we've seen this in a couple of other papers. So it's various ways in which a critical reasoning question can be asked, and I'm just trying to take you through the various types of questions. Your practice test will also have many of these. We'll have practice test on conclusion, practice test on assumption, and then there'll be practice test on other types of questions. Acha, Bhaskar says that questions like these are given in aptitude wise. So what is aptitude wise? Is it like a textbook or something which you are referring to? Or are they in other aptitude exams which you have come across, non-placement related? Bhaskar, I didn't get what is aptitude wise. You will have to explain. Now, another type of question which we come across. So far, what have we seen? First, we identified one paragraph which is given, and sometimes we had just one statement, and we saw what is the premise and what is the conclusion. So this is something that we had to identify from a longer paragraph. Yeah. So premise always comes first and conclusion comes later. This is what we studied. Premise is the reason and conclusion is the outcome. Okay. Then we went into statements which were given to us. In between, we also saw line of reasoning. So we saw what is a strong argument, what is a weak argument, how to judge whether strong or weak. Then we went into statement and assumption, where particular statements are given to us and we have to only judge whether assumption is implicit or not. Right? This is what we studied. And 1C8 has a good doubt. If the assumption is strong and there is no other chance, then it gives a strong conclusion. Yeah, that is the assumption that you have to pick. Correct. Right? So we saw 2 statements which were given and 2 assumptions that we had to judge between. Sometimes what will happen is you have a longer paragraph. And from that paragraph, like we did before, we identify premise, identify conclusion, identify line of reasoning. The question is to spot an assumption from a longer paragraph. Okay. So now the questions become more interesting. So how do you spot an assumption? First, you do the same method that we have been doing so far. Okay. This is your basic method. This you have to identify in all the arguments that you go through, longer arguments in critical reasoning. Then you come to, are there any gaps? Ask the question why. Why do you say so? Why can we judge that it is a strong conclusion? Are there any other possibilities? Are there things which you have not taken into consideration? What is missing that can complete the argument? What assumption is possible that can make the argument strong? Right? Is all the evidence that you have presented enough, or do you need some additional support to justify the argument? Are there any gaps that we are trying to address? This is what you have to try to spot. Okay. So A283 has a question. In the previous question, there's a possibility of another assumption. To know packed food should be healthier to take. Acha. We'll come back to that. I haven't exactly understood what you mean to ask. Maybe if you want to just elaborate a little bit, it will make it easier. Yeah. So let's come to slightly longer assumptions. Now, this is a longer question. And I want you to spot what assumption is hidden in this question. First, identify premise, identify conclusion, identify line of reasoning. Is there a question you can ask? Why? Why is this supposed to be true? Are there any other possibilities? And then try to identify your assumption that the author has made. Okay, so A2B2 has identified the premise and the conclusion perfectly. Good. This word helps us in doing that. Now move to the next step. What is an assumption that the author has made while making this statement? Nishma, that might not be the assumption. You need to elaborate a bit more. Okay, so 3F1 has one assumption. That's a fair assumption. I'm looking for another. Okay, A2B2 assumption, we have to save the earth. No, I don't think so. Okay, fine. I'll give you that assumption. Chalo, we have to save. That is also an assumption. Look at the possibilities related to actual real world. If this was a statement which was made in our actual by someone, would you say this is true? Would you agree with it? Or would there be a few gaps which you can spot? So let's solve it, and we'll also discuss what you all are putting on the chat. I'm seeing some really interesting replies coming in. Yeah. 230. You are headed in the right direction. You just need to refine it a bit more. So vehicles use fuels like petrol and diesel, which cause a lot of pollution and threaten the environment with global warming. This is our premise one. And what is premise one? Petrol and diesel are causing a lot of pollution. Okay. What is premise two? Fuels like CNG and methanol are much cleaner. So this is premise two. So one was two fuels which are causing pollution and leading to global warming. Yeah. So let's put it here. Petrol, diesel cause pollution. I'm going to write it in short, and they are leading to global warming. Acha. 212 as a funny one. Price of petrol and diesel are increasing. Unrelated. Not an assumption. Yeah. Then you have alternate. CNG and methanol are cleaner. Yeah. So from these two, the author has drawn a conclusion. So what is the conclusion? The conclusion is that replacing petrol and diesel in vehicles with the cleaner ones will save us from global warming. So replace and save. This is your conclusion. Okay. From these two premises, is there an assumption that you can draw? One is quite clear, it's almost given to you. If petrol and diesel cause pollution and lead to global warming, fuels like CNG and methanol are cleaner. So one assumption is, what is the meaning of cleaner? Cleaner means they will not cause pollution and they will not lead to global warming. So this is one assumption which you get from this word cleaner. Okay. Another assumption which, so we have one assumption which is okay. I'm okay with this. Another assumption which someone said is that from this entire argument, we assume that we have to save the world. Otherwise, you would not do this, na, replace and all, right? So we assume that we need to prevent global warming, that global warming is bad. Either of these can be assumptions. So either we need to prevent global warming or global warming is bad for all of us. This is a fair assumption. Both of them are true. I'm not going to question that. But I am looking for an assumption that will weaken this line of reasoning. There are a few gaps here. When you replace petrol and diesel with CNG and methanol, therefore, so this suggests a conclusion. Replacement of petrol and diesel in vehicles with cleaner ones will save us from global warming. Sorry, I think I changed the slide. Ask the question why. Why are you saying that only replacing petrol and diesel will save you? Are there other reasons for global warming? Or is vehicles and petrol the only reason? Not necessary, right? There can be manufacturing industries, iron and steel, coal, power generation, oil. All of these industries, deforestation. Yes, perfect. All of these reasons are gaps which the author has not considered when he goes from the premise to the conclusion. He has considered only one assumption, that petrol and diesel are the only causes of pollution and global warming. And if you replace them, you will save us. But it may not happen. Actually, petrol and diesel contribute only 17% of the pollution. The remaining pollution is a lot of other sources. One is your other industries, which is close to 30%. One is the animals that we eat, right? People grow pigs, cow, chicken. All of these animals are also a cause of pollution and they are for our consumption. So that's another. Okay. So this is an assumption that we missed. The assumption was, and it was a mistaken assumption that the author made, that petrol and diesel were the only cause of pollution and global warming, which is not true. So that was your assumption. If that assumption is true, if this assumption is true, then this line of reasoning becomes very strong. If petrol and diesel are the only cause, then this statement becomes true. Therefore, replacing it will save us. Then you can say you are okay. But otherwise, the gap is what we found as your assumption. Okay. So was this more interesting? A longer statement, slightly confusing? Now let's do a question which has options. Okay, so now you don't need to come up with assumptions and type it in the chat. You can just select the answer from one of the options. Acha, some are confused on the meaning of artifact. So artifact is something that has been discovered in the ground, something from history. It could be something that people use in the house and then, it gets buried under layers and layers of earth. And that is what explorers discover, archaeologists, they discover. So it's something that was used by maybe humans a long time ago. That is an artifact. Sometimes it can be precious as well. It might be made of gold or silver or something. Yeah. So let's start with the steps that we have been doing so far. Although many doubts, and by the way, answer is only one. It's not multiple answers. So you have to pick one out of them. I think some of the replies that I've received have 2 or 3 answers. Yeah. So let's identify premise and conclusion. Many doubts have been raised as to the accuracy of age estimation for a recently found African artifact. This is premise 1. Only up till here. Okay. Many doubts have been raised. This is something that someone is telling us. So basically, some explorers have discovered some African artifact from many, many years ago. Right? Maybe it was buried somewhere under the ground. And they are trying to estimate the age of the object, how old it is, from when it was used. That is a method in which they try to estimate civilization started using such objects how long back. That's how we discovered that humans first we were hunter gatherers, which means we relied on the forest for food and we relied on animals for food. And then humans became farmers, where we started growing our own food. So when exactly this happened is done by estimating the age of these farming tools, which are found in some of the archaeological sites. Yeah. So doubts have been raised as to the accuracy of age estimation of one of the artifacts. Okay. All this criticism has no grounds is not a premise. The premise is many doubts have been raised. To estimate the age of the artifact, archaeologists used a radiocarbon dating method known to be highly accurate in estimating the age of organic materials. So to estimate the age of this artifact, they used a method which is known to be highly accurate while estimating organic materials. Important statement. This is premise 2. So can we say premise 2 came first? Yeah. They used a method to estimate the age. Premise 2 came first. Many doubts were raised on the accuracy of this method. Premise 1 came later. And then came your conclusion. The author is saying all this criticism has no grounds. This is your conclusion. So first artifact was discovered and a method which is known to be highly accurate while estimating organic materials was used on it. Then doubts have been raised as to the accuracy of estimation. And then the author goes on to say all these doubts have no grounds. Okay. So this is your line of reasoning. This is what we've studied so far. Identify premise, identify conclusion. What happens first, what happens later. Now, the conclusion depends on which of the following assumptions. Now, conclusion depends on which assumption, not premise or premise. The conclusion, what is the conclusion? The author is saying all this criticism has no grounds. So the author has rubbished all the doubt that has been created. Now, why would he say that? We need to prove some assumption which will make this conclusion stronger. So each statement you take and you treat as an assumption. If this was my assumption, does it mean that the conclusion becomes stronger or not? This is what you have to judge. Yeah. Modern dating methods are generally more accurate than older dating methods. Now, is there anywhere in the argument that the author has compared this dating method with something which was used before? No. So there is no comparison. It's just one method that is mentioned. Okay, the radiocarbon dating method known to be highly accurate. So this doesn't become an assumption which relates to your question. It goes out of scope. Written records report that artifacts similar to the one recently found were being used at the time indicated by the radiocarbon dating method. Okay, but will B weaken or strengthen the author's argument? It does neither. It just tells you that items that were found at that time were dated using the same method. But whether the accuracy of this method is established by that, no. So this also becomes unrelated. Recently uncovered African artifact is made of organic material. This is your assumption. Because the radiocarbon dating method known to be highly accurate in estimating the age of organic materials. And this criticism will have no grounds only if the artifact which is found is also organic. Only then does this line of reasoning become very strong. This line of reasoning, this entire argument, becomes strong only if a highly accurate method is used on an organic material. If the artifact itself is not organic, then the same doubts can be continued to be raised. No? Then the author's argument is fallen flat, that criticism has been rubbished. It does not hold. This criticism is useless only if this artifact is organic. This was your assumption, which we missed. Some of the scientists who doubt the accuracy of the age estimation are very young. This is talking about age of scientists, not related to artifacts at all. And radiocarbon dating cannot accurately estimate age of objects and materials that are more than 60,000 years old, right? This statement is talking about an age beyond which it doesn't work. But nowhere in this argument have we been given what is the approximate age, whether it is below 60, whether it is above. So to assume that this is not working above 60 does nothing to your argument. So this is also incorrect. Your answer is C. Okay. So any doubts in this? Anyone who didn't understand? I did get a few correct answers from the chat. Let's do one more of these, a slightly longer one along with options. I think a slightly easier one also. Yeah. So now we move on to inference. Assumption was something that was hidden. It was a hidden premise. It was not told to us. Inference is a hidden conclusion. So when you go from premise to conclusion, we have many premises leading to one conclusion. For identifying an inference, you need to ask the question, what else can be true? Given the premises and given our assumptions, what other conclusion is possible that is not mentioned, and that becomes your unstated or implied conclusion. It becomes your inference. Okay. So while looking for inference, you are only looking for a conclusion that is not mentioned. That's it. Okay, so Satya is asking, what is a flavonoid? So flavonoid is a component of plants. You can say something that is inside a plant. Exact definition even I don't know. In fact, let's Google it. Let me check. Sometimes this happens. A critical reasoning problem may have something that goes bouncer. You just have to take the best version of it, whatever you understand from it. So Google says flavonoid is an organic compound found in plants and animals. Okay, so this is something inside plants and animals at the cellular level. So from the answers, I have got a few correct answers, which is nice to see. So you are thinking in the right direction. Good. So let's implement the same method that we have been implementing so far. First, identify what are the premises, what is the conclusion. Flavonoids are a common component of almost all plants, but a specific variety of flavonoids in apples has found to be an antioxidant. Okay, so this is premise one. Let's say premise one, flavonoids are common in all plants. Premise two, a specific variety of flavonoid in apples is found to be antioxidant. So premise two, flavonoid in apple is found to be an antioxidant. So I'm just writing anti over here. Yeah. And premise three. So this was premise one, premise two, premise three. Antioxidants are known to be a factor in the prevention of heart disease. Okay, this is premise three. Antioxidants a factor in the prevention of heart disease. So I'm just writing HD over here. Fair enough. So premise one, premise two, premise three, there is no conclusion given to us. The question is, which one of the following can be properly inferred from the passage? So the conclusion which is not mentioned is an inference, a hidden conclusion, something that is not given to us. So all we need to do is we need to check which of these statements will fit as a continuing line after this argument. So what can we say is a conclusion? After this, heart disease, if you substitute any of these statements, will it work or not? This is what you have to judge. Okay, from these three premises. So if you say a conclusion of a diet composed largely of fruits and vegetables will help to prevent heart disease. But what have you been told in premises? Flavonoids are there in all plants. Only one variety of flavonoids in apples is an antioxidant. And antioxidants in general are known to be a factor in preventing heart disease. There might be more factors as well. So diet composed largely of fruits and vegetables, but does it include apples or not? And how do you know that it will help to prevent heart disease if you don't know whether it includes apples? So this is not true. Flavonoids are essential to preventing heart disease. This is also incorrect because one specific variety of flavonoids in apples is an antioxidant, and antioxidants are a factor in the prevention of heart disease. There might be other factors, A, and all flavonoids are not essential. Only this one specific variety of flavonoid can be found to be useful. So two problems. Problem one, which doesn't work, and problem two is essential. No, there might be other cures as well. So this is also not your option. Eating at least one apple every day will prevent heart disease. See, a specific variety of flavonoid in apples has been found to be an antioxidant, and antioxidants are known to be a factor in prevention of heart disease. But how much antioxidant to consume? Is this given in the passage anywhere? Ki we need to eat the amount of flavonoid which is given in one apple or two apples or five apples. No, that is not told to us. So you cannot conclude this. At least one type of flavonoid helps to prevent heart disease. This can be inferred because this at least one, a specific variety of flavonoid in apples is an antioxidant, and antioxidants are known to be a factor in prevention of heart disease. So which means that at least one type of flavonoid helps. So this can be your answer, D. Okay, so this was going from premises that were given to us and trying to get to an inference. Now, what is an inference? An inference was a conclusion that was not mentioned. Okay, in this case, we had to do something very simple. We had to just substitute each line into a continuation statement and see if it works or not. Can we use it as a conclusion? You could also use the term therefore. Right? Yeah, so therefore, it cannot be used, or therefore, this will prevent, and see if it works or not. Okay, so this we come to the end of my last class with you all. You do have one more class of verbal ability. One class is later today, and I think one class will be on Saturday. Okay, but critical reasoning brings to an end my sessions with you all, and this has been extremely fun. So I've enjoyed being with you in the class. I've enjoyed all the responses and the participation that I got right from the first class, when we did our photo exercise, when we did synonyms, antonyms, and also we did a few confusing words. Okay, so I've tried to take you through some aspects of a vocabulary and of critical reasoning in my sessions, and I think we did para jumbles as well. Okay, so those who do need to reach out to me at some time over the next 6 months, if you do, then I'll just put my number here on the screen. Yeah, so you can keep my number, and in case you need to discuss anything related to your preparation or related to verbal ability or your exams, you can reach out to me. Not a problem. Okay, and yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn also. So I'm there on LinkedIn, I'm there on Insta. So yeah, but Insta better to follow Apex page rather than my page for verbal ability. You'll find much more interesting stuff on Apex page with a preparation perspective. right? So I hope that my sessions have been a learning experience, and I hope that you've also had fun. I've tried to keep it a bit light. Maybe this class was slightly heavy towards the end. I got a few comments of, okay, taking time to figure out what is the method and all. But with practice, you will be able to do it. Okay, so there will be a lot of practice questions on the website. For now, I think we only put up one test every day in the topic that you learn. But after your course is done, you will have 2 or 3 more practice tests on the same topic. So keep attempting. Any doubts or queries, you can reach out to me. Anything that you can discuss, you want to discuss, I'm available on WhatsApp. Not a problem. Okay, chalo. So let's end today a few minutes early. And hopefully I will see you all again. In case we do a program with you before your actual placements happen, before the companies come down, we might come for a revision or some sort of paper solving session, maybe some mock papers or something. So in that case, I will see you all again in a few months, hopefully. Chalo, until then, take care. Bye bye. Have a good rest of the week and all the best for your exams as well.